Can a song save a dying German Shepherd puppy on a forgotten road in West Virginia? By the time I found this 3-month-old white puppy, she was skin and bone beside a full bowl of food, refusing to eat and quietly giving up. It was early afternoon outside Beckley, West Virginia, the kind of flat daylight that makes everything look worn out. I was driving the shelter van back from a supply run when a flash of white by the ditch caught my eye. I hit the brakes, backed up, and there she was, a tiny white German Shepherd puppy, ribs sharp as wire, folded into herself beside a cheap metal bowl heaped with dry food. The smell of it hit me when I opened the door, but she didn't move toward it. Most starving dogs will crawl for one more mouthful. This one just lay there like the choice had already been made. I called to her, kept my voice low, the way you do with broken things. Nothing. No growl, no flinch, no tail, just a slow, fragile blink like it cost her too much to keep her eyes open. I crouched a few feet away and nudged the bowl closer with my boot, the kibble rattling against metal in the quiet. She still didn't look at it. Up close, I could see every bone, every hollow between them, her fur dull and dirty where white should have glowed. When I finally slid my hands under her, she barely reacted, just let herself be lifted, light as an empty jacket. Back then, I didn't understand what was wrong with her. I just knew that if she didn't eat today, tomorrow might never come. Have you ever seen eyes that don't ask for help anymore? That's what stared back at me from the crate in the rearview mirror as I drove toward the shelter. She lay curled on a thin blanket, that same metal bowl wedged beside her, full of food I'd poured fresh. I tried sliding it closer every few miles, talking to her like she could answer. Nothing. No shift of her head, no sniff. Not even a glance. At a red light, I cracked the window and held a small cup of water near her nose. Her tongue never moved. She just breathed, shallow and slow, like each breath was a job she hadn't signed up for. Under the shelter lights, everything looked harsher. They lifted her gently onto the exam table, hands moving over that tiny German Shepherd puppy, checking bones, joints, belly. No fractures, no open wounds, just dehydration, severe weight loss, slut, and a body that had been running on empty for too long. The vet sighed and said something I won't forget. She might be in shutdown. Sometimes after enough neglect, they just stop. The food can be right there, but their mind has already walked away. I'd been doing this for years, moving from kennel to kennel like a man on autopilot. But looking at her, it felt like someone had held up a mirror to my own burned-out insides. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't begging. She had simply checked out. That evening, after the bustle died down and most of the lights were dim, I went back to her cage just to sit. I didn't have a plan. I just sank to the floor, leaned against the bars, and without thinking, started humming an old melody from my childhood. For the longest time, she didn't move. Then one soft ear flicked just once toward the sound. She never looked at the bowl, but she moved for the song. I didn't plan to sing to a starving German Shepherd puppy. It just happened. The shelter was winding down when I ended up back on the concrete floor in front of her kennel. The other dogs barked, but this 3-month-old white German Shepherd puppy just lay in the corner, still. I brought a fresh bowl, tried softer food, then warm broth, then little pieces in my hand, holding them right under her nose. She turned her head a fraction each time, like she knew what I was offering and had already decided the answer was no. Her ribs rose and fell. Nothing more. In that heavy quiet, my mind went to my childhood living room, an old upright piano, my mom's hands on the keys, our family dog asleep underneath, chest rising to whatever tune she played. Without really thinking, I started humming that same little melody through the bars, just a low, steady line of notes, the way I used to hear it from the hallway. At first, her eyes were dull, fixed on nothing. Then they shifted just a little toward my voice. The emptiness in them loosened. She let out a faint sigh, and one ear lifted instead of pinning back. When I stopped, her gaze floated away again, like someone dimming a light. When I started humming once more, it found me, slow but sure, as if the song was the only thing cutting through the fog in her head. I went home that night with one thought I couldn't shake. Maybe she didn't need food yet. Maybe she needed someone who wouldn't turn the song off. How do you name a puppy who hasn't decided if she wants to live? I came in early the next morning before the phones started ringing and the halls filled with noise. The shelter was still half asleep. Lights low, air cold. I went straight to her kennel and sat down on the floor like I'd done it 1,000 times before. The bowl was already there, warm broth and soft food pushed close to the gate. I pretended not to see it. No clinking metal, no coaxing. Just me, the bars, and this 3-month-old white German Shepherd puppy curled tight in the corner. I started with the song. Same old melody from when I was a kid, the one my mom used to hum while she played piano in our little living room. The notes came out rough at first, but they settled into something steady. As I sang, she turned her head a little closer, like the sound had a hook in it. Her nose lifted, pulled once, twice toward the smell of the bowl, then stopped. She didn't touch it, but her eyes weren't completely empty anymore. It felt like there was this thin, invisible string between us, humming with every note. My name is Silas, and at 43, I'd thought most of my strings were worn out. Apparently, I was wrong. I keep thinking of the ocean when I sing this, I told her quietly, even though we were buried in the hills of West Virginia. Far away, but alive. If you're ever ready, I'm going to call you Maren. When I said it out loud, Maren, her tail moved just enough to notice, or maybe she blinked a little too fast. It wasn't much, but it was real. Later that day, the vet caught me in the hallway and reminded me the shelter was full. If there was no progress with food in the next few days, we'd have to talk about moving her on or making a kind decision. I went back to her kennel and watched her breathe, watched that thin chest rise and fall. I'd only just started her song. There was no way I was going to let them cut it off halfway. What do you do when a shelter cage isn't enough to keep a puppy alive? A couple days after we named her, I asked if I could take Maren home on foster. No big speeches, just a simple, "She's not going to turn around in here. Let me try." They handed me the clipboard, we signed the temporary papers, and suddenly this 3-month-old white German Shepherd puppy was riding out of the shelter in my truck like she belonged to someone. My house isn't much. Small place outside Beckley, old floors that creak in the wrong weather. In the corner of the living room sits my mother's piano, buried under a film of dust and a few years of not wanting to feel too much. Most days it's just furniture I walk around. I made her a spot on a folded blanket near that piano, set down a bowl of soft food and fresh water, and sat beside her on the floor. She lay there on her side, eyes somewhere past the wall, like the room was empty, even with me in it. So I did the only thing I'd seen her respond to. I started humming our song. Same slow melody, just my voice and the quiet creak of the house settling around us. The sound filled the room in a different way here. No barking, no metal doors, just breathing and notes. After a while, I noticed her chest wasn't hitching so hard. Her breaths evened out, deeper, steadier, like the music was smoothing the edges of whatever hurt was chewing her up inside. I looked at her, then at that old piano sitting in the corner, silent and heavy. If this song could reach her like this, I wondered what might happen if she could hear it the way I first did, coming to life under real keys. I hadn't touched that piano in years, but Maren made the silence feel unbearable. That night, the house was so quiet I could hear her breathing from the living room floor. Just a soft, uneven rise and fall from the little nest I'd made for her in the corner. Blanket, water, a bowl of soft food she still wouldn't touch. The piano sat there under a film of dust, same spot it had held my whole life. I wiped off the bench with my hand and sat down like I was doing something I shouldn't. My fingers hovered over the keys, stiff and unsure, like they didn't remember who they used to be. I chose the only thing that made sense, the same simple, warm, slightly sad melody I'd been humming in the shelter. The first note rang out sharper than I expected, then settled into the room. On the second note, I heard her claws shift against the floor. By the third, Maren lifted her head. She didn't try to stand. She just stared straight at me, eyes locked on my back like the sound was pulling her in. The vibrations ran through the wood, down the legs of the piano, across the floorboards to where she lay. I could feel them under my feet and under my feet. I imagined them under her ribs too, filling in all the hollow places. I didn't look at the food bowl. I let the music do the talking, filling every corner of the room with something gentler than words. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her drag herself an inch closer, then another, slow as rain. The song kept moving, and so did she. At one point, there was a pause in the notes, and she gathered herself, pushing shakily onto her paws. She swayed, then took one small, determined step toward the bowl. I didn't dare even turn my head. I just kept playing, pretending I didn't notice the miracle happening 2 steps away from me. Do you remember the first time someone chose you over their fear? Maren stood there, swaying on those shaky legs, while I kept my hands on the keys and my eyes on the worn ivory. The little white German Shepherd puppy in my living room took one more step until her nose hovered over the bowl. She didn't dive in. She just breathed in the warm smell like she was trying to decide if this moment was safe. I heard her sniff once, then again, deeper this time. For a second, I thought she was going to back away and fold herself into that empty place again. Instead, I heard it. The smallest scrape of teeth against soft food. One slow, careful bite. Then another. I almost lost the melody right there, but I kept playing, more afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing was finally holding her here. After a few mouthfuls, she stopped and looked toward the piano with eyes that weren't just hollow anymore. There was a tiny spark there, not just survival, but the beginning of curiosity, like she wanted to know what else might follow the song. The next morning, I tried to feed her without the music, just a bowl on the floor between us. She glanced at it once, then turned away. That's when it hit me. If she needed accompaniment to stay in this world, then I was going to play as long as my fingers worked. I just didn't know how I could stay at that piano all day, while the silence waited to take her back, the second I walked away. What happens when you can't be there every time a rescued puppy needs you to breathe? That was the part no one tells you about. Life doesn't stop just because a 3-month-old white German Shepherd puppy has decided she'll only eat to the sound of your hands on the keys. I still had a job, bills, a beat-up car that needed coaxing every cold morning. So I built us a routine. Short session at the piano before sunrise, just long enough for Maren to drag herself to the bowl and take a few slow bites. Then, at night, a longer concert in the living room, her stretched out nearby, eating in tiny pauses between the notes. On the days I got stuck late at the shelter or in traffic outside Beckley, I'd come home to the same picture, full bowl, untouched. She'd look at me, then at the piano, like the food didn't exist without the sound wrapped around it. Her weight crept up, but so slowly it scared me. The vet frowned at her chart, talked about organs under strain, about how long a body could run on almost nothing. Feeding tube came up. Force, restraint, tubes and tape. Everything in me tightened at the thought of breaking that fragile thread of trust we just started to weave. One night, worn down and a little angry at the world, I played longer than usual. Same simple melody over and over until my fingers ached. Maren finished what she could and then just lay there, watching me. And then she did something new. She lifted her head, opened her mouth, and let out a long, shaky sound. Not a bark, not a whine, but something between a sigh and a note, hanging there in the air with my chords. I froze, hands hovering above the keys, heart in my throat. If she'd found her voice, even just that little bit, what else was still hiding inside her, waiting for us to wake it up? I thought we were past the worst. I was wrong. One morning I woke up and something felt off before I even left the bedroom. The house was too quiet, even for us. When I found Maren, my little white German Shepherd puppy was lying flatter than usual on her blanket, breathing just a bit too hard, eyes barely open. I called her name. Nothing. When she tried to stand, her legs folded and a small tremor ran through her whole body, like a wire buzzing on low power. I didn't think. I just scooped her up, felt how light she still was, and rushed her back to the clinic. Under the harsh lights again, they hooked her up to monitors and IVs. The vet's face said enough before the words came. The stress, the long starvation, the slow progress, her body was cashing the checks it couldn't afford. If she doesn't start taking in food on her own, they said quietly, the outlook isn't good. There was no piano in that back room, just metal cages and the beeping of machines. So I sat on the cold floor beside her crate and did the only thing I had left. I started to sing our song. At first she didn't move at all, nose buried in a thin blanket, wires taped to her shaved leg. So I pulled out my phone, found a rough recording I'd made of myself playing at home, and let those familiar chords spill out into the sterile air while I kept my voice low and steady over them. I dipped my finger into a bit of soft food, a kind of nutrient paste, and gently touched it to her lips as the music played. For a long moment, nothing. Then her tongue slid out, just a little, and she licked my finger once. I tried again, this time with a tiny smear on a spoon, and she gave it one slow, deliberate lick. The vet glanced at the monitor, then at her, then at me. If she keeps taking even this much through the night, they said, we might still have a real chance to dodge the worst. Some victories are so quiet you only hear them if you're listening with your heart. I walked into the clinic that morning feeling like I'd been scraped out and left in the parking lot. No sleep, just coffee and worry. A tech met me at the door with a small, tired smile and said, "She ate through the night. Tiny amounts, but steady. We kept your music on loop." There she was, my little white German Shepherd puppy, still hooked to lines, but her eyes were a little clearer, her breathing less of a struggle. Numbers on the monitor looked better. Not perfect, but better. A few days later, after fluids and careful feeding, they cleared her to come back home with me, under strict instructions and a list of things to watch. Carrying her out of there felt different this time. She wasn't just weight in my arms. She was possibility. Back in the living room, I set her down near her usual spot, bowl ready. Then I took my place at the piano and let that same old melody roll out across the keys. She didn't crawl this time. Maren pushed herself up, shook once, and walked. Actually walked to the bowl as soon as the first few notes filled the room. Head down, no hesitation, she started to eat like a dog who finally remembered what food was for. For the first time in weeks, I let my hands fall still and just watched. Healthy, steady bites. Little pauses to breathe, then right back to it. No begging, no pleading, no fear squeezing my ribs. The days that followed were like a slow montage in real time. Her sides filling out, her steps getting bouncier, stealing my sleeve, tugging at my pant leg, arguing every time I tried to end a session at the keys. One evening, I stopped mid-song, fingers hovering, and she marched over, put both front paws on my knee, and let out a soft, bossy whine. Like she was saying, "Hey, we're not done." I laughed with tears sitting hot behind my eyes. "You lost the battle with hunger, Maren," I told her quietly. "But it looks like you won the war for your song." I just didn't know yet if I had the courage to keep her song in my house forever. Some adoptions don't happen on paper. They happen the moment you realize you can't imagine your house without those paws. I went back to the shelter with a folder full of notes about her feeds, meds, little weight gains that felt like lottery wins. The staff called her the music puppy and smiled every time they asked how my white German Shepherd puppy was doing at home. They were already talking about finding her a family, someone quiet, patient, maybe with a piano, they joked. I nodded along, but every time I pictured explaining to strangers that she ate best when someone played a certain song, my chest tightened. I imagined her lying on a strange floor in a strange house, waiting for a melody that never came. That night, I sat back down at my piano like always. Maren curled at my feet, then rolled onto her back, paws in the air, letting out those soft little howls that didn't match the notes but somehow fit the song anyway. Her tail thumped against the hardwood in this steady rhythm, and for a second, the whole house felt like it was breathing with us. A few days later, at the shelter desk, they slid a single form in front of me. Name, address, contact. At the bottom, one word weighted over an empty line, adopter. I stared at it longer than I should have, pen heavy in my hand, and realized the decision hadn't been waiting here on the counter. It had already happened in my living room, just in every quiet night with her head against my foot and my hands on the keys. I signed my name, and it felt like I was adopting more than a dog. I was taking back a part of myself I'd left in the dark a long time ago. Driving home, I took the same forgotten road outside Beckley, where I'd first seen that tiny body beside the full bowl. Only this time, Maren sat in the passenger seat, bright-eyed, watching the world fly by. That was the day I knew we'd never again pass by a dog lying next to a full dish with empty eyes and just keep driving. What if the thing that saves a life isn't in a bowl, but in your hands and your voice? I think about that every time I look at Maren now. I still see that first picture in my mind. A tiny white German Shepherd puppy, skin and bone, beside a full bowl of food on a forgotten road outside Beckley, West Virginia. The food was there. The body was there. The will to live was gone. And then I look at her now, sprawled by the old piano, healthy and bright, eyes sparkling, belly full, head tipped back while she sings along with my clumsy playing. Same dog, same world, different ending. I've learned that sometimes animals don't just need calories. They need someone who will sit in the silence and not be scared off by it. Someone who will wait and hum and be there when they finally decide to reach back. This little pup's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Without a small shelter, a worn-out van, and a handful of people who refuse to give up on a starving puppy, this story would have stopped on that roadside. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's the meds, the late nights on the floor, the slow progress charts on the fridge, the music you play even when your hands are tired. Right now, Maren is safe. She's warm, fed, and curled up on a soft rug in a house that finally feels like home for both of us. But there are so many other dogs out there still lying next to full bowls with empty eyes, waiting for someone to notice them. If you can, support your local shelters and the volunteers who keep showing up. If your life allows it, consider adopting, fostering, or just sharing stories like hers. Every view, every share, might be the reason someone takes a dog to a rescue instead of leaving them behind. Most nights end the same way now. I sit at the old piano. Maren settles beside me, lifts her head, and lets out that thin, wobbly howl that doesn't fit any key but somehow fits our song perfectly. It's our small prayer for all the dogs still waiting to be heard. Join our brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.